This fan base is amazing. The city of Cincinnati is amazing, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Desmond fakes a handoff, runs to the right. He's got all sorts of room to the 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Bearcats! 20, 25, toward the middle of the field at the 35, and he is gone! Trey Tucker will take it 98 yards to the house. A nip at night knockout as the Bearcats send a message to the college football world. Did you see that?
Howdy, folks, and welcome back to VIVA LA CATS. I'm your host, Justin Hiles, accompanied by my great friend, Steve Maurer, and we are the Cincinnati podcast representing the 1012 network. We host Bearcats Spaces pretty much weekly. We've been slacking a little bit, but there's one that we have to cover that we did not get to cover on Spaces, and that is Game 3 of the Big 12 slate for the Bearcats. We are officially 1-2 to start off conference play. And there's a lot of different opinions, but overall, I think the vibes are positive. It's not 1-2 looks really good compared to how we've done, which is far superior to that. I don't think this record reflects how well the Bearcats have played. I think there's a lot of things that we need to clean up. But if you told us that we were going to be 1-2 and we were going to take all these teams down to the wire the full way through, I think anybody would have taken that. Steve?
Yeah, if you're telling me that we would have played the first three teams on our conference schedule, all ranked games, and then, by the way, next three games will all likely be against ranked teams as well, and we went 1-2. Again, with how, my expectations were after a couple games that will leave in 2023, I am constantly surprised by this team and by the fact last night, Justin, no Aziz, and still were able to keep it a one possession game. Obviously, we could talk about the end of the game, but I do think that, this is still that BYU win is doing numbers for me right now. And I think that they, that it's a lot closer than what I thought it might be. I kind of thought that, playing against these teams that have been playing Big 12 basketball for years, playing much better for years, some of them having better talent than us, I definitely thought we were walking into a murderer's row. And, maybe the first three games are just a mirage, but it looked great so far. I mean, I can't really complain, Justin, about a 10-point win on the road and then 2 one-possession losses, where one you arguably should have had and one where you had a chance to win with your last possession.
Yeah, well, and this is something I threw up, but I wanted to highlight this. Through those first 3 games, the Bearcats are +7 in scoring, which shows you how close these games are, considering the fact that one of those games was a double-digit win. Rebounding were +15, points in the paint were +22. And like I said, we've been neck and neck all game long. There's not been one single game so far that has gotten away from us. There's been games where we've had, a slide for 3, 4, 5 minutes, but there's not been a single game where the gap has opened up and it's just held and we have not been able to catch up, or we have not been able to take a lead. I think we've had a lead in all of these games as well, which is really good too, because given what we were all told and what we should have expected going into this conference, we were expecting to look how UCF looked the first game that they played against Kansas State, where it was just going to be ugly. And I'm not going to lie, I knew that we were in a much different place than UCF, but watching that game before we got ours after that BYU game, and I was like, all right, now we got a couple more ranked games, and we've got some incumbent Hateful Eight teams. I'm a little scared, but against Texas, against Baylor, Bearcats through and through found a way to stay in it until the final possession. It's a one-shot game. And I think the worst part too is in all of these situations, the Bearcats had leads that they could have protected, or had leads that could have ended up winning them the game, but a free throw here, a turnover here, a missed shot here, those few tiny little things start compounding. And unfortunately, sometimes it'll get the better of you at the end of the game. The one thing I really want to cover about this Baylor game, unfortunately, again, I think it was a 62-59 loss. Yeah. 62-59 loss on the road. And you held one of the best offensive teams in the country to 62 points. That's really saying something. And I think that shows the amount of progress that we've made. And at first I was a little like, okay, maybe the Bearcats defense and all of that is just a fluke because BYU shot bad. And then we played Texas, who had a decent offense, but had a great defense. And then we played Baylor, who has a fantastic offense. And these teams have been held under 75 points. Like, this is a thing that's like, of course, you know, you're going to try to have as much defensive coverage as you can, but I think we've done a good job, and it's not all on teams missing shots. I think it really comes down to Bearcats playing tough, playing gritty every single possession, having guys like John Newman who are super scrappy on the court, having guys try to get in and create plays. I think that that's such a huge thing that felt very missing in the front half when we had our non-conference slate against those other Q1 opponents. So I think, you know, everything felt like it was going up for a long time here in this game. And then Scott Drew called a timeout. They switched to the zone, and then everything kind of went downhill. And unfortunately, you know, you don't come out on top in the end of it, but you have so many of these games that are one possession close at the end. You're going to come out on top eventually.
Yep. Yeah. And then I think it's just really, again, working through some of these games. And I'm taking it more as a positive that we are staying right there within these games, missing two guys who are likely starters, especially in this last game with Aziz and CJ. We still don't know about the CJ progress. We might not see him again. It just, that hamstring has really dogged him for his whole college career, and I feel bad for the guy. But, you know, Aziz too, his back is really hurting him. And so apparently he tried to do something to make it better, which just made it worse. So hopefully we can have those guys back against TCU. But Justin, I just wanted to play this clip real quick. This is from our friend Ryan Roberts that we've had on the show before. And this is a clip of Scott Drew talking about Wes Miller and just about how much he likes the team.
Wes Miller has done a great job with them. You look at his tenure there in a short period of time. He's brought in a great roster, and he's been one of the best compliments a coach can ever give another coach is your team what you really are. And they really compete, very physical. So very impressed with them. Obviously, first go around, you learn a lot more about somebody's teams and players. Normally in this league, what makes it so good is it's hard to outcoach anybody because coaches are really good. It's a players' league and players make plays.
So, I mean, you know, that's one of a national title winning coach talking well about our coach. And I think it was like Big 12 Bearcats or somebody on the timeline today is like, all these other coaches recognize what Bearcat fans cannot. And I'm not going to go that far. I do think that some of our fans are a little bit down on Wes, especially in these late game situations, and only seeing the molehill before seeing the mountain, which is that look at how far we've come from the end of the Brandon era to year one and year two to right here, being able to be on the doorstep of winning, like arguably possibly being 3-0 in the Big 12. Like,
yeah,
to me, I'm taking that as a positive right now. If we start losing these games by more or continuing to not win these one possession, two possession games, then maybe the tide will turn for me. But right now, I'm just 3 games in, I'm taking it just as a positive.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, ups and downs. There's a lot of finicky stuff, but let's be real. You win on the road at BYU. You're a travel away from being 2-0, a missed travel call away from being 2-0, and then you're one made layup or one made 3 at the end of the game away from being 3-0. So again, on the road. I mean, I think what the Bearcats have done so far is really impressive, like we've said, against expectations. And looking forward for what we have over the next few games and throughout the rest of the season, I'm really curious to see how they keep the ball rolling. I am very encouraged by everything that I've seen so far. I think it is, again, just a few of those little ticky-tack things like free throws, turnovers, controlling those possessions, making sure that we're taking good looks all the time, taking good shots, not forcing anything. I think what I have noticed that was not happening earlier in the season, that's happening now, we're playing a lot deeper into the shot clock. Of course, you don't want to have shot clock violations But I don't know how many shot clock violations we had throughout all of non-conference, but I'm pretty sure we've had more in these 3 games than we had up to then. And that just shows that they're trying to find a better shot. And I think that that's a really important thing that we look at as we're trying to measure out how this team is going to perform. If you're just hucking stuff up and, we're not a very fast tempo offense, we're maybe top 100, but if you're just trying to huck stuff up, it's not really always going to work. And to be frank, especially from 3, it has not been working for the Bearcats. So
Especially
that's
on the
another
road.
thing we need to solve. But like I said, I'm very encouraged. Shout out to Dan Skillings. The amount of time that we waited for this guy to just kind of like find his groove and really start moving. He scored like 25 in like 2 other
25.
games this
Yep.
season. And so scoring 24 last night, I think is really impressive. The heat check run that he went on at the end of the game, this is what makes me feel encouraged. You look at the end of the Texas game, Seamus going unconscious. You look at the end of the Baylor game, Dan Skillings going unconscious. You have guys, and they're different guys, who are hitting that takeover button at the end of the game. And that's really good. Now we just need to find how to make those guys consistent and do that night in, night out. But I think so far, we at least have somebody who's going to answer that call. It's just, can we have the other guys around him to support him? Because in last night's game, it was a little rough if it wasn't Dan Skillings.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's just the battle with this team this year without having one of those top line guys like a Landers or a David DeJulius is just seeing who's going to be that guy at the end of the game who's able to step up. And some of us are hoping it's Jizzle, some are hoping it's Dan, maybe it's CMOS, like you said, but whoever it is, we just need that guy to show themselves because like I said, like I'm going to keep saying 15 more games of the gauntlet. Y'all better be ready.
Yeah. I mean, and speaking of the gauntlet, games we've got coming up. This is one thing that I threw out earlier today. And so I think we've got enough votes that we might as well just call it here. We started off 1 and 2. We got another 3 consecutive ranked games, as Steve mentioned earlier. So with 8 total games in January, I want to know what everybody thought. What are the vibes of how many games we're going to get out here? What's our record going to be at the end? And of course, we have TCU, OU, at Kansas, UCF, and at West Virginia left. And so the consensus vote was pretty tied, but between 3 and 4 and 4 and 4 was generally the consensus answer there. Not a lot of people hot on the 5 and 3 or 6 or 2 option. So I don't think anybody is expecting that. I don't think anybody's really hoping for that, but I think 3 and 4, 4 and 4, I think 4 and 4, while it might seem like a stretch, given how tough this conference is very achievable. And I don't, and again, like we've said, you're 2 possessions away from being 3 and 0. And that's just far beyond where anybody thought that this would be. So I'm really encouraged by that. But speaking of those games coming up, TCU, oh, how do you package this whole deal in? They lost to number 2 Kansas on the road by 2. They had lost to Nevada and Clemson earlier in the season, but they lost to number 2 Kansas on the road to start off Big 12 play. 83-81, 1 possession game. They then beat, following that, number 9 Oklahoma and number 2 Houston at home. Back-to-back games. So just like us, they had 3 ranked games to start. They had 3 top 10 games to start. And they went 2 and 1. And one of those, they were 1 possession away. This TCU team is very underrated. And I think there's a legit shot that these guys could be killers by the end of the year.
I would even argue, Justin, that TCU should have probably won that game at Houston if it wasn't for the little home whistle there.
Kansas.
At Kansas. That the home whistle there that the Kansas group got. There was a Kansas player on Kansas player crime because Ernest Uday transferred away from Kansas to go to TCU, and he was the one that got called for it. So
Bill Self, the bag man, at it again.
Seriously, Justin, my dog, he hand selects those referees just to make sure. So if you remember what Jamie Dixon's teams were like in the Big 12, tough defensive team, that their offensive numbers have seemed to improve as his time at TCU has gone on. They are averaging a scoring margin of 16.2 points per game, allow 67 points a game, score 84. They shoot pretty well from I'm reading this all from bracketologist.com. You can look at the matchup there. Their defense, they run guys off the about the same as us, 30.3 for them, 30.7 for us. We make more threes, and obviously when we're at home, that's a good thing. And then Justin, we know what we're going to talk about here. Free throws. TCU is leading the battle there, 73% to 68. And I don't want to harp on this, but Baylor game, Texas game, probably could have won both of those with free throws. I'm just saying. TCU also forces about 6 more turnovers per game, 16 turnovers per game, more than the Bearcats 12. They average about 4 more takeaways than turnovers. So it's just going to be a tough game, man. They're pretty close to us in the net. We're 32, they're 29, they're 23 in KenPom, we're 33. Right now, I would say Cincinnati would probably be like a 1-point favorite just because, we're the home team. And while TCU has looked good and they will be ranked, we saw what that did for Texas last week.
Yeah.
And I think what we got to look for, Justin, during this game is, one, if Aziz comes back, that will be huge. TCU does have, like I said, Ernest Uday, but I do think the Bearcats can have some size advantage there. UC does control the boards, 4 more boards on average than TCU. So if we can get Aziz back and playing, that would be great. And then if we can just, again, salt away one of these games late, if we're in that position and able to take care of business, this will be another huge win for the Bearcats.
Yeah. And I mean, I think for me, I think one of the things I look at is how well the Bearcats can control some of the players. When you've got some of these star guys in the court, I think when I look at Oklahoma, which we'll get to in a second, but also talking about TCU, you've got a guy like Emmanuel Miller, who has done a very good job of being their leading scorer, being their go-to guy, and has showed up in some of these big games. And he's putting double digits on the board every single game. He's averaging almost 17 points a game. This is a guy that you have to control. I think that we did a very good job, credit to Day in that, when we locked up Asmus in the Texas game. Taking out that key scorer will really keep you in a game. I can never figure out that guy's name, by the way. It's Abmas, but it's pronounced Asmus. Asmus. I don't know. Abmas. I don't know. Yeah. I've seen it everywhere. I've seen all the different pronunciations. Explain. I don't know. But regardless,
I just did. Abmas.
I think it's Abmas too, or Abmas, something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Too much talk on Texas. They're gone. We're past that milestone. TCU, however, they've got 4 double-digit scores throughout their starting lineup. And, that's pretty good for game control. You want to have a lot of your go-to guys. We've seen a lot of that from the Big 12 so far. In retrospect, when you look at how the Bearcats have performed, I think we've done a pretty good job of keeping guys involved, but we don't have that consistent, 4, 5, sometimes 6. There's a few games. I think Baylor yesterday, had 6 double-digit scores, which really shows you how solidified their starting 5 is. And I think they even said on the broadcast that Scott Drew had only played like 1 starting lineup the entire time. And this was the first time that he had switched a guy out. And that was like the second lineup, versus Wes has played like 8 starting lineups this year. And it's just been because of injuries and what have you, other, caveat, weird nuances for however this season's gone. But so far, I think we've got a good shot against TCU. They look really tough, but you got to be able to control the game. And if you can do that at home, use that environment, use that energy, really make sure that you're taking care of the boards too. That's clearly been a key for us. And if we can continue to do that, and if we have Aziz, I don't know if we have an official answer on him yet, but we've got 2 days to figure it out. If he can get back on the court, I think you've got a really good chance to win that game. And then looking forward to Oklahoma, like I said before, I think this is another thing that I've noticed. They have a lot of, scoring from all of their team, but they too have 2 go-to guys, and everybody else is pretty far behind. They've got a 15 and 14 point score. The next closest is 9. And so their spread is a little bit tighter on just those 2 key guys for McCollum. And I don't even know how to say his name. I don't know. I don't know. But those 2 guys key in on those guys, lock them down. I think the Bearcats defense has shown that it's getting a little bit grittier throughout the season. It's playing with a bit higher tenacity. Keep up the energy and shut some of these teams down. I think Oklahoma is a bit more winnable personally than TCU from what I've seen from TCU.
So here's what I'll say about Oklahoma. They play their next game at home against West Virginia, which should be a win for them. Man, West Virginia has fallen off extremely hard this year.
But they did take Texas.
Yeah, fair enough. So I will say though, Oklahoma is 13-3 right now, but their last 2 losses were their first 2 road games of the year. And their next road game will obviously be in Cincinnati. So if Cincinnati can really bring that intensity, they lost to TCU by 9, lost to Kansas by 12. Obviously 2 pretty good teams, but Cincinnati is right up there in a net perspective and a KenPom perspective with TCU. So I feel like if they've found some things that if they can see some things in that TCU film that they like and then try see against TCU, they should be able to bring those things to the Oklahoma game. And I think it's just, again, getting healthy. On the team sheet here, just in the comparisons, Bearcats are only beating the Sooners and rebounding again. And I think, Justin, that is such a huge advantage for this year, just being able to win those rebounding battles. And we talked about it last year. Most of the time when the Bearcats won the rebounding battle, they won the game. And this year they've been really competitive in the rebounding battle. They've had a lot of good stats. A lot of coaches are talking about how well they rebound and how well they play defense. So I think if they can continue to win these rebounding battles, they can continue to rack up these great performances and then just those last 5 minutes convert them into wins.
Yeah. Well, and this is one thing I want to ask you because I'm curious. If I had told you that by the time we're just starting Big 12 play, we would be one of the best, top 3 rebounding teams in the country after what we saw last year, I think anybody would have thought you were crazy.
Yeah.
And that's just, I think the craziest part is how much that has changed from last year to this year. Wes got into the portal. He found some key guys in Jameel and Aziz, and Vic's still doing his thing. And then we've got a few other guys who have the length and the athleticism to play a little bit more positionless basketball. They're finding a way to just keep control of the game by the boards. I mean, still one of my favorite quotes of all time in Bearcats lore, we got our ass beat on the glass. Keep it up. Keep this thing rolling. And I think you have a chance to stay in all these games because so far what I've seen is there's no other team in the Big 12 that's really emphasized rebounding quite as much as we have. And I think my biggest complaint last year, aside from, of course, free throws, because every game it happens and it's just a Cincinnati thing. Last year, we'd huck up a shot and you'd see 4 guys running down the court. They were past the half court line by the time the shot hits the bucket, whether it goes in or not. And this year, we've got 3 guys staying in the paint. You got almost 4. You've got your full team trying to get those offensive rebounds. And I think it makes a huge difference because it's keeping us in the game. And offensively, on offensive rebounds, we're doing a fantastic job. That's the key to staying in these games, especially against the Big 12, who is very good at rebounding.
I think that, maybe the rebounds are also an inflated stat just because, once the team shoots a 3, usually, as you said, other teams will usually get back on defense, and maybe we're just able to collect some more rebounds just from the fact that we are defending and they shoot a 3 brick, we get it. But you're right, though. Offensive rebounds, for example, last night, Bearcats win the offensive rebounding battle 8-6. I do think that getting those little lay-ins and putting points back up, you got to get points any way you can in these games, Justin. And we've seen so far through 3 games how much of a war it is in the paint. And maybe not as much in BYU. They don't really have. I watched them against UCF yesterday, Justin. They played with fire there and basically pulled it out at the end. UCF might be coming on a little bit more than expected. Maybe we just shouldn't count them as an automatic dub. But I think that was a bad matchup for BYU because they can't score any in the paint, and they're basically their whole offense, as we saw during that game, was just shooting 3s. And that's a credit to Wes. He knows how to limit a team when, what's that old Bill Belichick adage? He takes away your team's strength. Wes took away BYU's strength in that game. And I think the number one thing that he's proven to me this year, Justin, is that the man can coach. Like how many lineups, like you said, we've had to go through this year, how many missing pieces we've had, people come in and out of games, availability due to injury, and we're still 12-4. I mean, and with 3 losses, well, I'll say with 2 one possession losses. How about that? And then, you could probably argue that maybe the Xavier game shouldn't have gotten away from us.
Mhm.
Other than that, like, man, what like a turnaround from last year for sure, just because people were like, this guy can't coach. And maybe the late game situations, he's still reading some of the literature on that, trying to figure that out. But as long as if we can just beat teams by 10 or more, we don't have to worry about those in a game
Yeah.
situation.
Well, and I think this is the most insane thing to me is that if you look at all the games we played thus far this season, I think the only game that's actually got away from us is Dayton. I think the
Yeah.
Xavier game definitely was
I'd
not
agree.
optimal, but Dayton got away from us. I think that's the only team that really actually like dominated Cincinnati. So
Yeah.
credit to the Dayton Flyers, as much as we hate giving you credit. My last point on this, and I know you mentioned the thing about Wes's coaching. And I think this is an important topic because there's been so much back and forth on people's opinion throughout this season and whether or not Wes has enough to get it done. Let's just look at it this way. Everything's been there every single game. There's not been a game that we've been out of this entire season, except for maybe that one Dayton game where I felt like we were ill prepared. Of course, you're missing some pieces there, but I think when you look ahead and you look through the rest of this season, there's a legit shot that the Bearcats pull out some big wins here. And it's just a matter of time. And I think Wes has clearly shown that we have enough to get it done. We just have to find the shot, have to find that one miracle thing at the end of the game, which that's not on coaching. That's purely on a guy making a shot or not. And let's look at this too. Like I was a little peeved at the end of the game when Dan went up for the Dan went up to make the layup at the end of the game. Bearcats were down 1, trying to get the lead. You got 15, 16 seconds left on the clock. He misses it. We get the rebound, or it taps out, goes out of bounds. You then draw up a play out of the timeout. You go out to execute. Scott Drew calls a timeout. You have even more time to think about it. And then we've got the play in hand. At first, my first glance, it really looked like all of that was focused on just getting Seamus that shot. But then when you look at the court, you have 3 guys covered. All your options are covered. He found an open shot. He took the shot. Unfortunately, it hit the back of the iron and popped out. And you're that close. You are literally that close to making a number 14 team lose at home in the Big 12. That is such a far advancement from where we've been. And so I think to look at how Wes has built this team out, has structured everything. He used his timeouts at the end of the game. He didn't have any in his pocket by the time the final whistle blew. He used them at the right time. I think a few of them were still a little bit later than they should have been, like when Baylor went on like a 12 or 13-point run. But he found ways to use them and to get the team back in it when we were, hope seemed lost. And so I think I've been really impressed with the way that he's done that. I think it just comes down to some of these guys making shots, making the free throws, making, not giving free turnovers at the end of the games. And I think we come out on top. And Wes has done a superb job, as much as it feels like it sucks because we've lost, 2 of these games that are so close.
That's my favorite thing about any college basketball podcast is the joke about making shots. And we have reached that level on this podcast, everyone. Got to do the make shots thing.
Yeah. Make your shots. I mean, and if you look at this game with how much Baylor struggled, we struggled even harder, especially from the 3. If you make 1, 2, 3 of those threes, this game is completely different. You crack this thing open. You're talking about cracking open a top 25 team on the road. So I think, like I said, I'm impressed. We just have to get a few more of those little pieces together, and the Bearcats are rolling, hopefully all the way to the NCAA tournament this year. We'll see.
Real quick,
at 500.
So if we want to reach the NCAA tournament, I've said that we probably have to go 8-10 or 9-9 in conference. looking at the rest of the way, using the quadrants, we have 3 more games against Q3 teams and 1 more game against quad 4 teams. Those are 2 games against West Virginia and 2 home games against Oklahoma State and Texas State. Kansas State. So 3 out of those 4 games are at home. If you can win those 4 games and just find 3 or 4 wins among the other quad 1C, I feel pretty good about our chances. Now, maybe they'll put in a mid-major team who's won like 35 games or something ahead of us, but now we get the benefit of the doubt of playing a Big 12 schedule and being able to say, look at our quad 1 record, baby. So I'm hoping that, again, like I said, win those 4 games that you're supposed to win and find 3 to 4 more wins within the quad 1C there. And I think you've got a good shot of seeing your name be called on Selection Sunday.
Yeah. And, credit to the net too. It's not completely 100% about wins and losses. A lot of that is too about how well you play teams, how close you play teams. And if the Bearcats keep that up, you got to find your wins. But I think there's a legit chance that happens at the end of the season. You might have to do a little something in the Big 12 tournament, but good odds. You just got to keep hope alive. That is the key. Keep hope alive. We're this close to turning key and unlocking all that. So excited for the rest of this basketball season. Steve, we've got a few other topics on the docket here. One of the big ones, we're moving back to the gridiron here. Defensive coordinator Brian Brown, no longer a Cincinnati Bearcat. What's going on there?
So apparently he was called back to his alma mater of Ole Miss, where he's going to be co-DC with former Alabama defensive coordinator Pete Golding. And then in an interesting move, Georgia actually hired Alabama's most recent co-defensive coordinator, Terrian Robinson, as their co-defensive coordinator. So I guess this is the thing now in the SEC where you can't just have one defensive coordinator, you need 2. So it is a little bit concerning, though, just because this has been Satterfield's only defensive coordinator since he started, or Brian Brown has been on his staff since 2012, since he started as a head coach. And he's been a defensive coordinator for the last 7 to 8 years. And I think that uncertainty is making people a little uncertain. Now, we've obviously seen a couple of names. Justin, I don't really understand where the Mike Mickens or the Greg Scruggs, Walter Stewart thing is coming from. Maybe Walter Stewart just because he's already on the staff, but
right.
I mean, Mike Mickens and Greg Scruggs, like, all love to them, but they're fickle guys. They're not like Mike Mickens did go to UC, but he's at Notre Dame. Like, I just don't know how Scott Satterfield is going to bring them in. Now, there is apparently Troy's defensive coordinator. We might be interested in him. This is a developing story. We'll see, but I do kind of worry about, well, this guy was the defensive coordinator here. He saw a chance at a co-defensive role, albeit at his alma mater, but still defensive coordinator. Like, you're not really leaving for alma mater unless it's your head.
Defensive coordinator?
Yes, co-defensive coordinator. So, Justin, do you share in this worry?
Yeah, I don't think it's all hands on deck, but I think the sirens are distant, and I'm a little concerned because you have a guy, like you said, that's been with him so long. That's a very well built out relationship. And then the second you move to another program, you got one bad season and that guy's out the gate, and he's been with him all the other seasons. So I understand it. Maybe he's looking for a way that maybe he can level up, but I just don't see how there's that ladder that he can climb any higher than being where he's at currently with Cincinnati as a defensive coordinator to just take another DC job. I just don't see it. But, maybe his push out from Satterfield and he wants something different for the defense. Maybe it's all Brian Brown. Maybe there's a little bit of everything. You never know. We don't usually know all the details there. But
it is weird, though, that they did it like after all the kids moved in and signed their letters of intent. And I don't know how much of a recruiting force he was, but I mean, we saw LSU do that, so it's not the same as us. We didn't push him out. He left on his own. Right. But it is just, I don't know. It's just a little bit worrying to me. I'm trying to just be behind Scott and like just trying to at least see some success here. But I think I'm at the point, Justin, where you probably can't do it after year 2. We probably don't have the buyout money, but year 3, and we're not making a bowl, I think you got to let him and Cunningham go and start fresh.
Yeah.
I'm putting it on the table now. I don't think it's really like that shocking for a school that went to the college football playoff less than 2 years ago to be in that position. But, you know, it's just going to be even more competitive in the new Big 12 where, you know, there's not really one ascendant power. It's 16 teams that are all kind of in the same area of the sport and probably recruiting at the same level. And if you're losing within that group, like you can find someone better. There's no longer going to be a Texas and an Oklahoma. And, you know, he did some good things in the transfer portal, was able to bring in some guys, obviously elder alum here, excited about bringing back Joe Royer from Ohio State. But I don't think it's going to be enough. Like we've consistently been ranked to finish last in way too early ratings this year. Losing your defensive coordinator to a co-DC role is a tough look. And again, I want to believe in Scott, but like so far, no message about how it's going to get better. Only just like having players with him at his final press conference to make sure that he wasn't like getting skewered with questions. It's just not. I just don't think it's good enough right now, Justin. And everybody knows that. I'm not really saying anything groundbreaking there, but it's not. And he's got the next 2 seasons to really prove it, because I don't think we have the money right now to fire him after 2 seasons.
Yeah. And I think when you look forward through this season and into next season, you have to really measure that against wins. There's not really much else that you get at this point. The first season was kind of just your trial period, but when you're in the Big 12, those wins matter. And especially when you lose Texas and you lose Oklahoma, granted, you're adding, a team like Utah, who's been pretty good as of late. You're adding a team like Arizona, who's been good as of late. RIP to our Arizona Wildcat fans and friends there. Sorry about Jed Fish. Welcome to the Big 12, baby. This is what happens when you come up. You get yoinked. So
Yeah.
Sorry about your head coach doing that to you. Been there, done that. Same to Washington. Sorry about your head coach doing that when you get up to the college football playoff. Been there, done that. We feel bad for you. I think, one of the biggest things for me when we look forward to the next 2 seasons is, like you said, that bowl eligibility line. I think this year was the one where it's like, you got to get something out of the bag. Next year, this season in 2024, I think that's the point that you have to hit bowl eligibility. And if you don't, I think you miss the mark. And I don't know how much time is left to build that back out. Of course, coaches need time, but this is not a thing where it's like, just my opinion, this is a fan base wide thing. People are feeling very impatient. And I think when you have a lot of noise on the outside, it depends on how close Cunningham and Satterfield are and how close the, board feels with Cunningham and feels with all these guys. But when there's a lot of outside pressure, there's usually a lot of inside pressure too. So, you got to get some good looks and get some good wins there. Hopefully it happens. But for right now, still a little shaky ground. This is
something, Justin, that is not shaky ground is charliehustle.com. Go over to charliehustle.com, shop the Big 12, support your secondary school that is not a Big 12 school. Shout out to Eddie Middlebrook, by the way, Baylor fan who interacts with the show all the time on Twitter. He should probably go buy some Baylor stuff from charliehustle.com. Use that code 101215, 15% off your first order. They just released a bunch of cool stuff. Justin, I was even intrigued by a Houston Cougar shirt. That's how impressive some of their stuff was. But by the way, just had to sneak that in there. charliehustle.com, promo code 101215, 15% off your first order.
Yeah. And last thing, Steve, round us out. Big 12. Guess what? Women's basketball. Katrina Merriweather
got her first win in conference. Shout out to the team. And now every football, basketball, and men's basketball and women's basketball all have a win against the Big 12 team. We just got to win another game against the legacy Big 12 team, and then we'll officially really be in this thing. So
yeah,
whoever does it first, let's figure it out.
I think that's all for today, folks. You know what they say. Viva
la Cats.